Hello, thank you for joining today's executive webinar session of Bimser International. Today, we'll talk about how to have a successful ISO 9001 certification audit and introductions to QDMS. My name is Kevin Deveci, and I am the Managing Director of Bimser International. Today, with me, I have Alex Kvartirov from Emras Consulting. He is a certified lead ISO auditor, and we'll learn from Alex today how to have a successful ISO 9001 certification audit and how to be prepared for it. After his informative presentation, we'll talk more about QDMS software as to its benefits, features, and how it can help you comply with ISO 9001 digitally. Let's get started. Alex, if you're ready, let's start with your presentation about how to have a successful ISO 9001 certification, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much, Kevin, for the introduction and for inviting me to make this presentation.
My pleasure.
Okay. We're just getting... All right. Can you see?
Yes, it looks good. Yes, perfect. Now it's full.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, today we're going to be talking about how do you achieve a successful ISO certification. And obviously, to be successful, there's a lot of preparation for it. So I'll be talking about what is needed to achieve certification, which is obviously an audit by the certification body. And that's a very complex effort. Requires a lot of preparation. So really, I'm just going to touch the surface. I could be talking for a whole week about this and go into the details, but here is just to give you an idea of what it takes to go through such an audit. So before I start my presentation, I just want to introduce my company and myself. I'm the principal of Emras Consulting, and also I'm a certified ISO 9001 lead auditor. And I've established my company back in 2015 after a lengthy career as a project manager in a large aerospace company, which is certified to the AS 9100 standard. And that standard is an aerospace standard. So currently, I provide consulting services for businesses that are either trying to achieve or are actually maintaining certification. So back in 2018, I came across through Kevin I met Bimser Solution company that has a suite of software tools, and I was particularly very interested in the QDMS tool because it certainly provides a lot of assistance to any business in the managing of and dealing with the massive data associated with, I guess, any ISO certification. So we'll talk more about how the QDMS tool can help any organization in dealing with ISO. And on top of that, I do a number of webinars and lectures on various ISO topics. So let's get into the discussion here. First, I just want to introduce about ISO audits. And there are various types of audits. Now the top, I guess, 3 audits there: the certification audit, recertification audit, and surveillance audit. Those are audits that are performed by a certification body. And they're certified to do those audits and then decide whether or not the organization is eligible to be certified. And they're also referred to as registrars. Now, for the certification audit, so here if you're going for your certification for the first time, then you go through 2 stages. Stage 1 is basically a quick review to make sure that you're ready for then stage 2, where the auditor thoroughly reviews all of your ISO processes and documents and records. Now, if you happen to fail the certification audit, then you will have to go through a recertification audit. And basically, it's another audit similar to the first one, focusing on the areas where you failed. Now, once you're certified, then there's a required yearly surveillance audit. And it's a shortened version of the certification audit, just to make sure that you're still maintaining all of your, I guess, processes and records and so on that you've agreed to implement, and that you're following your quality management system, your QMS. So this is the important thing, that if you're have any deviations from it, then you got to make the appropriate corrections. Now, once you're certified, you need to also perform an internal audit. And this is very important, because the auditor looks at the internal audit results, and hopefully the internal auditor will catch some deficiencies, and then the auditor will look for how you corrected those problems. And that's an important part, is to show your process. And this is really leads to this continuous improvement process. The internal audit can be done either by internal personnel, as long as they don't audit their own work, or could be done by an external third party. But again, any ISO requires you to perform an internal audit at least once a year. So let's look, first of all, what are the audit goals and purpose? What does the auditor look for? Okay, and obviously the goal is to check the effectiveness of the QMS. Obviously, before you even go for certification, your organization must have an established quality management system, or QMS. Obviously, without it, you can't go very far. So again, that's the QMS must be consistent and comply with all the requirements of ISO, and it is implemented and maintained. All right, it's not enough to just create your documents and then deviate from them and do whatever you feel like it. No, you have to make sure that you follow your QMS that's documented in all of your procedures. And then obviously you have to identify non-compliances and make corrections. And that's a continuous process, whether it's because your procedures or documents are not correct, or because there's some issues with your product or service, or maybe your customer identified some non-compliances. So you have to deal with it and make corrections, and that's, again, all part of this continuous improvement process. Now, there's a lot of information that the auditor reviews and goes over. And first thing is, you have to establish and define your processes. And again, ISO doesn't tell you what kind of processes you have to have. It's strictly dependent on your business. And again, as your business evolves, you can modify those processes. But as long as all of your documentation agrees with your processes, and that you implement them in accordance with the documentation. All the processes have to be integrated, and there's got to be an interrelationship. And all of that is reviewed by the auditor. Then, of course, you have a number of documents. ISO only requires a very few number of documents. So again, those documents depends on your needs, the organization needs, and documents are important because they control the processes. But the document has to reflect the processes, and if they're not, then appropriate changes have to be made. As when you start to develop and build your product or service and start the delivery of your product, you will have a lot of records associated with it. And records is just data that you collect as part of your development process or testing process. And those records or the data is used to analyze and make decisions on which improvements you're going to be making. So improvements really should be made based on information that you've collected and not just wild guesses. Now, obviously, ISO generates a lot of data, the documents, records, and so on. And ISO doesn't really require you to be digital. I mean, you can still pass and get certified with everything stored as hard copies in file cabinets. But there's a lot of problems and disadvantages using this approach because you obviously have poor control and they're located in one place, and you know they're not really protected from some events that could happen. The better way is to have most of the information electronically stored, but those could be stored on various computers scattered throughout the organization. So again, it may be difficult to find what you're looking for. So really the best way, the ideal way, is to have all of the ISO data saved on a central database, which is managed by a software tool. And certainly what I'm referring to is the QDMS software tool is one of the tools that certainly does give you all those capabilities. So now everything that you need is on one server, whether the server is a local server or a remote server, it doesn't really matter, but all your data now is in one place. Oh, something happened there.
Yeah, looks like, are you able to share your screen again? Looks like it stopped.
All right, okay, sorry.
No problem.
Okay, now we can continue. All right, so now is, well, how do you prepare for such an audit? Well, obviously, as I mentioned before, you have to select an auditor or a registrar, and there are a number of registrars available. Certainly, you can find them on the website. However, really, the important thing is to choose the auditor who is familiar with the particular product or service that you're selling. For example, if you're in the electronic business, as you're selling electronic equipment, you don't want to hire an auditor who's familiar with the medical processes and technology. So, because the auditor really should be familiar with the processes in a particular business. So that's a very important part of it. So once you've identified the auditor, you have to really show him that you are fully implementing your QMS. Okay, it's functional, and you're really using it so that all your internal processes are integrated and functional. All the documentation is released and distributed to cognizant personnel. Again, that you got to make sure that the latest version is only available to the people that need to use it. Sometimes there's confusion, well, which version is the latest version? So there must be a total control of the documentation and how it's distributed. Your performance data. Obviously, as part of the quality, you have to achieve certain performance, certain quality factors, and they have to be analyzed. So data, you have to collect the data, then analyze it to allow you to perform continuous improvement. And then your corrective action process has to be very effective and tightly controlled, so that any corrective actions that have to be resolved, they are managed and brought to a successful conclusion. There's a lot of times where, you know, corrective actions are identified and it's sort of, you know, falls lost in the noise, okay? But it has to be managed to a successful conclusion. The important part or important aspect that the auditor will look for is that management understands and embraces all the ISO principles, and that it enforces it through the entire organization. So it's not that management relies on some people and then they're just staying away from it. No, they have to make sure that all of the ISO principles are utilized and applied throughout the organizations. Then the auditor will interview or talk to different staff members at all levels, or, you know, certainly he'll pick which levels he is going to interview. And again, he will question the employees whether or not they're familiar with the ISO principles and how it's applied to their particular work. Prior to inviting the auditor for the certification audit, an internal audit has to be performed. And again, I mentioned before, you can use your own people or an external auditor, but you need to perform the whole audit on the entire QMS and identify discrepancies and show how those discrepancies were resolved. So all that traceability is very important to convince the auditor that your QMS is fully functional. The last, you know, point here is, okay, well, what is the preparation time before you can do a certification audit? Well, it really depends on the state of your organization. If you're ISO compliant, that means that you're following all the ISO you know, principles, and it's just a matter of formalizing it and getting a registrar and go through this stage 1, stage 2 certification. I would say 2 to 3 months is a reasonable time. However, if you have to do a lot of work, it can take up to a year, and it really depends on what priority ISO certification is, because obviously you have to maintain your normal business operation. So it's really, but to get to the level, if you're non-compliant to a point where you're compliant, may take a year or more. Well, okay, now you're ready. You've selected your auditor, your registrar, and now you scheduled the actual audit. So the actual audit consists of 3 parts. Really, is the opening meeting, then the actual audit, and then the closing meeting. So during the opening meeting, the auditor meets mostly with management, and he wants to familiarize with the organization, and he will review the auditor's plan and his scope, and, you know, who he would like to talk to in the schedule. So he gives management an idea to allow him to prepare and getting the right people to discuss or support the auditor's questions. Then comes the actual audit. And here's really the meat of it, where the auditor reviews all the processes, documentation, how your corrective action process and methods are utilized. A lot of interviews of any member of your staff. He's going to ask questions, make sure that they understand how ISO applies to their particular job. He will also look at the quality objectives of the organizations and how and if they are met. And as I mentioned before, the auditor will look at the results of the internal audit that was performed prior to the certification audit to see how the discrepancies were identified and what was the corrective action process. So it's a very extensive review, and depending on the size of the organization, it could take a day and a half, 2 days, to maybe a week or more. And finally, when it's complete, there's a closing meeting. So at that point, the auditor will again meet with management and present all of the non-compliant findings. Now here, it's hopefully there will be obviously some action items, some corrections to be done. So he will work out a plan of when the corrective actions, the response to the actions should be provided, whether it's a 30, 60-day period, depending on the nature of the non-compliance, or hopefully not. The auditor may say, well, there's so many issues that we need, you did not pass, and we need to reschedule a recertification audit in the future when you obviously make all the corrections. So, and once you respond to all the action items satisfactorily, then the registrar issues officially your certificate. Okay, well, as a conclusion, and again, this is here, as I mentioned before, ISO does not dictate how you implement ISO. Like I say, you can be totally hard copies, no electronics, storage. That's your decision. However, to make it easier on everybody, using a software tool, specifically QDMS, really gives you a lot of advantages that I already mentioned before, because it really has all the data that's needed for ISO integrated in a central database. So it has all the documents, your records, all the information, all your plans, everything is in there. So auditor doesn't have to ask and have people search for the information, which wastes time and makes the auditor very unhappy. The advantages of this tool is that the administrator can set the read and write privileges so that certain people can only have read privileges, and others can have both. And where this is a very, I think, a big advantage of the tool is that now it supports virtual audits and actually offsite work. Certainly now during the COVID environment, and even after the pandemic is over, will still be offsite work. And then how can you work if you don't have access to all of this QMS data? So now, using the QDMS tool, you have access to all of the data as if you're working on site. So I think it's a tremendous advantage for not only performing audits, but also doing offsite work. And as I mentioned, it prevents from having documents and records scattered throughout the organization. Sometimes you don't know where they are and you have to look for them, and it just wastes a lot of time. So again, the advantages is now QDMS certainly provides all the tools that are required to have documentation, configuration control, and traceability of the changes. So obviously, documents change, but ISO requires that you have to have traceability of the changes and why they were made. And QDMS provides that automatically. You don't have to go to another tool or have your come up with your own technique of storing that information. QDMS has that stored for you. And then, as I mentioned before, there are corrective actions. There's activities to complete a corrective action process. So there has to be a schedule which is monitored. And if the deadlines are missed and you're not making the schedule, that should be reported to management so that management can take some action. And all of those features are supported by QDMS. So as I mentioned before, those are the key advantages of using a tool, and it really helps you manage your ISO data and anything that has to do with performing all of your internal processes. Well, I guess that completes my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'm going to pass this on out to Kevin.
Alex, thank you very much for your informative and educational presentation. Let me take over the screen and we can continue our session. As we learned from Alex, there are preparations that need to take place before any ISO 9001 certification audit. And also Alex talked about what type of steps actually are being done in terms of ISO 9001 certification process. And as he discussed earlier, and as we also addressed in our previous executive webinar sessions, QDMS helps you comply with ISO 9001 digitally. And let's talk about it in more detail. Well, first of all, Bimser International is a global enterprise software publisher since 1998. We are based in New York and we have global presence. We are also ISO 9001 certified. We also have certifications of ISO 27001 and ISO 15504. So we also have a quality management system in place, and we also use QDMS internally on a daily basis within our organization. Bimser has been developing QDMS since 1998, so it's a very mature system. It's been in the market for decades. There are more than 1,000 corporate clients that QDMS has, and there are more than 1 million professional users using QDMS on a daily basis to comply with ISO and other quality management systems. It is a certified application by Acumatica ERP as well as Sage Intacct ERP system, so integrations are seamless. In addition, there are different benefits of using QDMS, just like Alex pointed out earlier. You can manage your quality management system digitally, no matter where you are. You may be working remotely or hybrid or on-site. You can access your quality management records digitally. Also, you can automate your quality management processes. You can follow up your corrective actions, your tasks, and also you can improve your business processes digitally. So in that sense, it is very beneficial to use QDMS at your organization. With the help of QDMS, you can comply with ISO 9001. At the same time, if you have other quality management systems that you need to comply with, you can also use QDMS for those as well. So once preparation of QDMS can help you manage your quality management systems digitally. It's a web-based system, so you can access from anywhere, whether from cloud, whether from your own servers. The system is flexible to deploy. It has advanced security features. It is permission-based. It has notifications, reminders, and escalations to make sure you can get your tasks done and you can actually follow up as well with your other team members. QDMS has advanced integration capabilities, so system talks to other software systems seamlessly to pull and push data. So the idea is to help you digitize your quality management system, to help you automate your quality management system, and to help you avoid double entry, which is very helpful for your organization. QDMS is vertical free, and there are many organizations that we are working with from different industries using QDMS. We are experiencing manufacturing, automotive, aerospace, aviation, energy, pharmaceutical, healthcare, and many other verticals and industries as listed on this slide. QDMS is modular. There are more than 30 modules available, so you can pick and choose any module that you like. In terms of ISO 9001, we have all the modules that covers ISO 9001 compliance requirements, starting with control document management, customer complaint management, corrective action, audit management, training, risk management, and many other modules are available. And you can pick and choose any of them that you like to digitize your quality management system, to automate it, and to access your records no matter where you are. In a nutshell, these are the benefits and features of QDMS: quality, risk, audit, performance, and compliance management software. Before we end our session, Alex, do you have any final remarks, final thoughts that you'd like to share with our attendees?
Yeah, certainly, Kevin. I just as a takeaway from my own experience, having worked many years in a aerospace organization, I think it's very important that whenever you're scheduled for an audit, whether it's a certification audit or a surveillance audit, which is done yearly, that you are always prepared for it. Is that you don't have to spend a week or two before the audit going crazy and collect all the data, information to satisfy the auditor. Now, in theory, if you follow and use the QDMS tool properly, you will have all the information that the auditor needs. So I think that's advantage number one. And the other advantage of using the QDMS software tool is now you can have part of your staff working remotely, and they would have, through the administrator permissions, having full access to the QDMS data that they need to view and as part of their work. So here, this software tool, QDMS, really kills two birds with one stone. It helps you prepare for the audit and allows you to have your staff work remotely very efficiently. So I think the advantages is just incredible, and I think that's my key point. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Alex, thank you so much, as always, with your educational presentation, as well as thank you for sharing your insights. Very important, and we much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Before we end our session, I'd like to also talk about a couple of different things. For example, Synergize 2022 Annual Virtual Summit and Conference of Bimser International is coming up. It is scheduled for March 16, 2022. We'll talk about how to automate business processes in this digital age and how to adopt digital transformation. So you're welcome to register via our Eventbrite page. Registrations are limited, and we are still accepting registrations at the moment. Since virtual seatings are limited as a virtual summit, we suggest you to actually register as soon as possible. Having said that, we have an Eventbrite page where you can find our virtual events such as Synergize 2022, our annual virtual summit. You can register for Synergize as well as you can register for our coming executive webinar series. So it's a happening site that we keep, happening page that we keep on Eventbrite. Also, we have a YouTube channel. It is our official channel on YouTube. It is Bimser International, and there are hundreds of videos about quality management, ISO 9001 compliance, as well as Industry 4.0 and preventive and predictive maintenance practices. So we believe you'll find YouTube channel of Bimser International to be very informative and helpful for your organization. I'd like to thank you for your time and thank you for your interest, and we are looking forward to having you at our coming executive webinar sessions. Thank you very much and have a nice day.